So we're holding Hilchas Niddah Siman Kuf Sadik Beis Dinei Kala Nechneses Lechupa. A Kala that is about to get married has some very unique halachas in preparing for the big day. As we will see in the next Siman, there's also some unique halachas concerning Dam Besulim, which is not the ordinary Dam. Ordinary Dam that we've been speaking about all along, that we're familiar with for the most part, is Dam Niddah, whether it's from the Basar or different kinds of situations where we know for sure it's from the Mikvaot, as opposed to Dam Maka and so forth. Sometimes we're unsure, we're machmir, and we've already gone through the various kinds of vestas, in various situations where a woman can sometimes be toila, especially if it's a kesem. And even with the kesem, it all depends on the color of the kesem, the location of the kesem, the size of the kesem. All these halachas that married women encounter, for the most part. Now, we're somehow going in the reverse. We're going to a kala who's not married yet, who may have other concerns, besides the gown. There's all kinds of things that a chas and kala have to deal with. But here, there's something that we're being introduced to that you may not even think about that it could happen, but apparently the Chazal were aware of human anatomy, biology, and they knew that there's something called Dam Chimud. Dam Chimud, which I may have mentioned here and there, is a dam of excitement, anticipation, perhaps very strong feelings of something that is about to happen. And this is not just anything that is about to happen. This is about being intimate or being very, very close with the man. Something that supposedly has is something very, very new. But even if it's not completely new, as we will see later, if it hasn't been there for a while, or somehow if the excitement can be brought back and reintroduced, it could happen. What happens is that a woman may see blood as a result of all this excitement. The closest thing that comes to this is exercise or some strenuous activity or even fear, which can bring on the vesed. But that's a different kind of a dam. The dam coming from the vesed as a result of different activities, we're familiar with that. Here, it's a very minute amount. It's not going to necessarily be a lot. It may not even be observable. But the Chachamim were choishish. Choishish meaning that it can happen. And because it can happen, she has to take some precautions. So that's some of the halachas that we'll be covering in this short siman. Various halachas that relate to Dam Chimud and to another possibility that can occur. And that is if a woman on the day of her wedding becomes a Niddah. What now? What do you do then? So there's a lot of halachas, a lot of minhagim. Not all of it is in the Shuchan Aruch and the Mechaber as to what is done, but for the most part we'll go into them as much as we can. So the Mechaber begins with the first halacha that is discussed in the Gemara Niddah, that once a woman agrees or accepts to get married and goes along and prepares herself seriously for that day, whether it is her clothes, whether it is other preparations for the day, once she gets into it, from that moment on, we are going to be choishish that she may see Dam Chimud, and we're going to treat it as Dam. Not exactly as regular Dam, as we will soon see. When there is regular Dam, there's three steps to it, or 3 stages involved. There is the 5 days that a woman waits until all dam is gone during a regular period. There's something called a hefsek tahara, that she checks herself after all the blood is gone after 5 days or so, that there's no more blood, and she does so before sundown. And then there's the beginning of the Shiva Nekiim, which is very important, that she sees no blood whatsoever, no spotting, 7 clean days before she goes to the Tevilah, before she goes to the Mikvaot. The halachas of a kala are a little bit different. She doesn't have to go through all these steps. As we will be learning later on, why there's a need to wait 4 or 5 days. Let's say a woman only has a 2-3 day period. She still has to wait 4 or 5 days. There's a reason for that, but we have to wait till we get to that. And the hefsek tahara is important because simply you want to know if she's clean, whether you can start the Shiva Nakim, because the Shiva Nakim literally means 7 clean days, completely clean. So the night is when you begin, right? The day goes after the night. So to count a complete day, we want to make sure that before the night began, that she was completely clean. So there are ways that women check themselves before, and that's called a hefsek tahara, which we'll discuss more in detail when we come to that. But a kala is a little bit different. There's more leniency with a kala, that she doesn't have to go through all the steps. Nonetheless, she has to go through something. She has to be clean before her wedding night. So here we have this concern, especially during the time of the Gemara. And I emphasize especially during the time of the Gemara, for a very good reason. Today, even if there's no dam chimud, every young girl who gets married is a niddah. She has not gone to the mikveh. There's even a halacha today that girls should not go to the mikveh. And for obvious reasons, the Chachamim were concerned that if, they would be completely clean, they would find some sort of excuse to do something which is asur. But in the olden days, and I saw even the Ben Ishchai bring down, that there was a minhag for girls to be toivel erev Yom Kippur. And in the real old days, it was a normal thing for men and women to be clean. Mikveh was part and parcel of daily life when you're dealing with taharas, when you're dealing with kodesh, when you're dealing with all kinds of halachas that have to do with kedusha and tahara. So back then it was quite different, the routine and what they had to be careful with. So when we go through the Brisa, you have to keep in mind that the Chachamim had in mind the routine back then. Nonetheless, some of it still applies now too, only because ultimately a woman is a niddah. So whether you look at it as dam chimud or not, in the end will not make too much of a difference. So, in quoting the Gemara, basically the moment that a woman accepts to get married, and what does accept mean? We will see in Halacha base, what does it mean? She accepted or she got ready. But for what we need to know right now is the moment she basically gets into the excitement of getting ready for the day of the wedding, from that point on she has to be choishes that maybe there will be some dam chimud. This cannot be too much in advance. This is, as we will see, getting closer and closer to the day of the wedding. Today we have, or some people have, the custom of proposing. Does that make it official? In other words, when the Chachamim said, Barega, the moment that a woman has agreed or has gotten into it, where do you start counting from? Is it the moment he proposed? Not really. And back then there was quite a bit of time between the engagement and the wedding. The engagement was a semi-wedding. Her status was not the status of a kala today. It was a much more serious status. She was semi-married when she was engaged, when there was erusin. Today we do the erusin and the kedushin underneath the chuppah. Right? Different brachas. Back then there was a lot of time. And the time was used for the kala to get ready. It took time. So when we're talking about getting ready or getting into it, we're obviously talking about as the day of the wedding approaches, because that's when the possibility of dam chimud can arise, because of the excitement. This dam is the Rabbanan. Why is it the Rabbanan? Yes, we've learned before, because she did not necessarily feel anything. We're just choishes she may have seen, but she can't see it anymore. Even if she were to check herself, zelo yazor, it won't help. Actually, that's the halacha. Even if she checks herself, even if she would, according to some, even if she put a moich inside, and by the way, she can't put a moich too much deeply. Why? Because she's a virgin. And when a woman is a virgin, she cannot check too deeply. She cannot put a moich all the way in. We will see, she still has to make bdikas later, as much as possible, as best as possible, as deep as possible, but it's not going to be as deep as a married woman. So, but in this case, even if she were to check and she says, I don't see anything, we say, you know what? You say you don't see anything, but it could be that it's no longer there, but it was there at one given time. That's all. So bdika, to eliminate the waiting period with dam chimut, does not help. Still, it's a derabanan, because she did not have any argosha. Some say also that the whole chashash, maybe she was choymed, maybe she got excited or full of desire. That also is a derabanan. All right. Either way, it helps us to know that this is derabanan, because there are situations where we're going to need to be lenient. Women today, as we said, are niddahs for the most part anyway. So what nafkamina could there be? The nafkamina could be if you have an older woman getting married. As we called her before, mesulekes domim. She's no longer having her period. She's no longer seeing blood. And let's say she wants to get married. She would also need zayin nekiyim. She would also need 7 clean days because of the dam chimut possibility. Or what about a pregnant woman? A pregnant woman getting married? Well, wait a minute. She can't do that. That's the halacha, by the way. We're concerned. We need to know who's the father. So she just can't jump.
But once she's already pregnant, it's a problem.
No, she still has to wait a certain amount of time.
With respect to knowing who the father is.
Yeah, once it's established, still, but the minig is not to. Obviously the halacha is very, very careful with this kind of a situation. We don't want to cause any unnecessary trouble. So, what is the scenario here that a pregnant woman wants to get married? To the same husband that just divorced her a couple days ago or a couple months ago. Obviously he's not a kohen. So in that kind of a situation, she may have to wait Shiva Nekiyim too, perhaps. Maybe. Right? So that's a possibility of a woman who may not necessarily be seeing blood anymore, either because she's older, or because she's married, or Menekes, she's nursing woman. These are all examples of women who should not be seeing blood anymore. Still perhaps they would have to wait the Shiva Nekiyim. Why? Why should they? So some say the loy plug. Loy plug is a term that's often used, but the Chachamim did not distinguish, did not differentiate. They established the halacha, and they said, you know what, this is it. It applies to all women. Actually, there are some situations, and we'll talk about it towards the end, that it may not apply to. I'll leave that for the end, for the last eve. But ordinarily, some say loy plug. The Chachamim would not, did not make any differentiations in their takana. And some actually say, you know what, just because she's an older woman, who's to say she won't be excited? In other words, the chashash of dam chimut can even apply to her. So some say either because of loy plug, there's no differentiation, that the kanas applies to all, or to most. And some say it's because it is possible that a woman who's older, or meuberes or menekes, would still have dam chimud. And that's why the requirement of waiting 7 clean days prior to the Be'ilas mitzvahs, as it's called, prior to the first time a husband is with his kala, she would have to wait 7 clean days. Alright, so let's see it inside. The Mechaber in Sif Aleph says like this. Tav'u li noseh. So they asked her to get ready to get married. And they asked her to get her approval. V'nit paisa. And she says, fine. She agreed. From that moment on, tzricha Shiva Nekiyim, she would have to sit 7 clean days. Ben gedola ben ktana, whether she's older, whether she's small, young girl. There's quite a few halachas, quite a few poskim who discuss this concerning situations where there's tnoim. Is tnoim a requirement for this to be official? Some people have a tnoim where basically the monetary issues are signed and sealed, so no one should change his mind. That's done before the chuppah. Some do it at the same time they do the chuppah. Many people do it that way. But by Hasidim, at least by many Hasidim, the way it's done is that sometime before, at the vort, that's what they call it today. Some people make vorts. A lot of people make vorts today, where they invite everybody, to the official engagement party, I guess they would call And then sometimes they sit down at that board and they make the tnoim. So that makes it official. However, the problem with that is that even though a vote may be necessary or tnoim may be necessary, it happens several months usually before the chasana, before the wedding. And that's too much time. Even though we'll see, the Rashba seems to hold that even though it happened a little bit before, as long as it didn't happen a lot before, it's perfectly okay. Sheva Nekiyim, and that's it. She just checked herself and she doesn't have to be worried about Dam Chimut. But anyway, as we said before, by the time her wedding comes around, she would have been a Niddah anyway. So regardless, because she will probably be a Niddah, she's going to need the Tvila, right? She's going to need the Shiva Nekim before. So depending on how you want to look at it, the halachas are still applicable because you either have the issues with Dam Chimut whenever they apply. In other words, there can be a situation where there's no Dam Nidas, but there is Dam Chimut, as we said, with a Gdoila. Or at the very least, a woman, an average woman, would still be a Niddah. So whether there was Dam Chimut or not will not make a difference. Whether she's excited or not, we hope she's excited, but that will not make a difference whether she needs to go or not. She's going to have to go anyway. So the Mechaber says, Tavuri Nosevit Paisa, she agreed. Sricholesh Shiva Nekiyim, she has to sit Shiva Nekiyim. Ben Gdoila, Ben Tana, whether she's older or younger. The Filu Botkatz, even if she checked herself Bishas Tviyah, when they asked her for her approval. Umatzot Tehora, and she is clean. Still, Shema Machmas Chimud, were choishes because of the chimud, perhaps there also tipas dam kechadol. It was a small drop of blood, like the seed of the mustard seed. Velo yirgisha boy, and she did not feel it. She wasn't aware of it. Umoina shiva mimochras yom atviyah, and she begins to count the 7 days after the day when she agreed to go along with the marriage. Ve'enat tzricha hefsek tahara. Okay, so the second part of this Seif Aleph deals with the Hefsek Tahara, the famous Hefsek Tahara, that is a requirement for a regular Niddah, that she has to first check herself to make sure that there's no more blood, either by, a good bdika or putting in a moch, as we will later on discuss. Here she doesn't need a Hefsek Tahara. In other words, even though she did not check herself, the Chaber says, when she should have, had she been required to have Hefsek Tahara, even if she did not check herself then, she still, by counting 7 days, but she does require, the Mechaber says, in the Shiva Nekim, she has to check that there's no other blood, that she's clean. Maybe I'll might as well read the Rav too. Kol Yom Lechatchila, according to some opinions, every day she should check of the 7. That's the Dasar Ramban. If she did not check herself, according to the Beis Yosef and Achronim, even if she only checked herself once within the 7 days, is good enough. Now, this Shiva Nekiyim is much more significant for a regular Niddah. By then, we don't let her get away with it by not doing at least a couple of vikas in the beginning and the end. Before she ends up going to the mikveh, we want to make sure that there was no blood. So even though there's a lechatchila then, during the Shiva Nekiyim of checking throughout the Shiva Nekiyim, there's also a minimum that would count. Here, the minimum is once, according to the way it's brought down here in the Rambam. So what's going on over here? There's a machlokes rishonim. The Gabe Hefsek Tahara. It's brought down in the Ran that some required this woman to have, like every other woman, a Hefsek Tahara and the bdikas during the Shiva Nekiyim. Some require of her to have the exact same thing. The Rashba, however, holds that she doesn't need a Hefsek Tahara, she doesn't need bdika during the Shiva Nekiyim. All she needs is that she waited for 7 days after the Tviyah, after that they asked her, are you ready to get married? Are you ready to go ahead with it? That's the Rashba. The Rosh, as apparently the Mechaber follows it, the Rosh and the Ran, they say you don't need a Hefsek Tahara. Why? Because the Chashash here is very minute, for very minute amount here. But the Rosh and the Ran do require her to make bdikas during the Shiva Nekiyim. So far so good. The Mechaber apparently goes with the Rosh, that says Eina tzricha hefsek tahara, she does not need it, and therefore she doesn't have to check herself, but she does need to check herself during the Shiva Nekiyim. So even though the Mechaber says that, if you look at the various Achronim, Shach ha'idno nohagu lehafsik betahara af lebesulo boitkim kol Shiva Nekiyim ken kosav marshal, that's the minute today nonetheless, to go ahead and still do the hefsek tahara, check herself before she begins the Shiva Nekiyim, and check throughout the Shiva Nekiyim. But they write, obviously we're lenient that if she did not only check herself only once during the Shiva Nekiyim, then that's fine. It's acceptable. In other words, with her, with the Kala, we're more makel. Okay. So we just said in general terms that if they asked her, are you ready to get married? From that moment on, she has to begin her Shiva Nekiyim. But when does it really begin? So in the Tur, he brings down the Rashba, and Beis Yosef also brings down the Ran, that the din, this halacha of the Gemara, that Tavu Olinase, that Dam Chimud may be a problem. In other words, she may actually see some Dam Chimud then. This does not mean that they asked for her approval on condition of getting married after several months. So don't misunderstand. They're saying that Tavu Olinase in the Gemara is talking about many, many months in advance, where she says, you know what, fine, I'll go along with it. But the wedding is not around the corner. It's many months later. We're talking about, this din is talking about from the, I guess a couple days or a week or two before the wedding, that she's getting ready. She's really getting ready for that day and making all the last moment preparations. The only thing is that even though that's how we hold, the Mechaber, who goes along like the Shitas of Rashba, he holds that they don't really have to be, those Shiva Nekiyim would not have to be too close to the wedding day. So it was, even if they were 2 weeks before, the holiday would be sufficient. That's where we will see the difference lies between the Mechaber and the final psak of the Ramah. So in reading it inside, the Mechaber says, Shivas Yomim Halalu, these 7 days that we've been talking about, Moinim oiso mish'a shehi someches bedato umechina atzmo lechupa. Once she prepares herself, once she is made up her mind, she actually gets seriously into making, I guess, the last preparations for the chuppah. Afal pi shelo niskatcho adayin, even though there's no kiddushin yet. Now there was nothing happened yet, as far as the kiddushin is concerned, but still, she's very, very into it, as long as it's not many, many months before. So that's the point over here. The Ramah says, Yesh lismoy chatvila somuch lebeilas mitzvah bechol madei efshar. And that's what we do today. I mean, everybody pretty much does that. We try to bring the tvila as close as possible to the night of the chuppah, in other words, to the beilas mitzvah, as much as possible. Obviously, this is better. Obviously, you don't want to take a chance. All kinds of things can go wrong. Now, what the Mechaber and the Ramah here don't discuss is pretty much the trend of today. Maybe we'll spend just a couple minutes on this trend. How does a Kala know that she's not going to become a Niddah when she gets married? It can happen. And if it does happen, it complicates matters in various ways. And everybody will do anything they can to avoid that, and they should. Who has the greatest concern that she may end up becoming a Niddah the night of the chuppah? Who would you guess has the greatest concern that this may happen to her? A girl who doesn't have a vesed kavua. She's not regular. And guess what? A lot of women today are not regular. They may be semi-regular, but they're not regular. If a girl is not regular, could you imagine what it will be like for her if it turns out that on the night of the chuppah, she becomes a Niddah? It complicates matters. The halacha is we still go ahead with the chasana. Some would say no. But that's the halacha. That we would say a woman who became a Niddah, whether it was the same day, whether it was at night, whether it was in the middle of the chuppah, regardless, we still go ahead with the wedding. There's specific halachas on how to handle such a case. from the giving of the ring, how it should be done, to where the two should sleep. They have to be separated. I don't know if we'll get into that right now, but this can happen. So what does a girl do to avoid? It's not necessarily the embarrassment. You can somewhat hide this from the public, but you don't want to go through it. Do you know what a mitzvah dance is? By some communities, at the end of the wedding, you have a mitzvah dance where everybody dances with the kala, but the chassan actually holds the kala's hand, and so does the father. But the chassan could not hold the kala's hand if she's a niddah. You can already see some of the problems that can arise where people will ask, what's going on? Why is she putting on gloves? Gloves is actually one option in some situations, but it can complicate matters. So what does a girl do to avoid this? They take pills. They take pills that will help regulate or stop the menstrual cycle. They take it several weeks before, and somehow this helps. Sometimes it doesn't help because it can cause other problems. It may not always help with the regulating, but it can cause side effects, serious side effects. Anyway, every girl has to consult her rabbi, who is familiar with this, of course, and with her personal doctor as to what she should do, depending on her cycle. Who's lucky? A girl who's regular. Then what? Just choose a date when you're not a niddah. Could it still happen to her? You better believe that it could happen. Because of what we just said. There's something called chimud. So even though she's regular, it could be the trip on the plane, it could be all the preparations, and it could actually be the same chimud that we're talking about here, that can bring about dam niddah, or dam chimud, on that night. So it's a question for everybody to evaluate whether she should do something about it or not. Everybody's circumstances is different. I'm not familiar with what everybody does. I just know that this is pretty much a trend, especially for those who are not regular.
If we are worried about chimud,
yeah,
the party following the chuppah.
Yeah. The party following the chuppah?
Right, with the dancing and the carrying on and whatever.
Yeah,
Can that trigger it?
No, but
That we're not worried about.
the party, no. I mean, maybe they'll get drunk, but that's a different problem. But no.
No,
Yeah. No, the Dam Chimud was a concern in anticipation of this big day, of this moment. And that could happen. By the way, if you're in I think when Rabbi Akiva, you know the story, you remember the story where the three Chachamim were walking down the road and they saw two Jewish children, one without a yarmulke, and one Tana said he must be a mamzer. He's walking without a yarmulke, without a head covering. The other Tana says, no, he doesn't have to be a mamzer. He could be a ben hanida too. His mother never went to the mikvah, so he has this chutzpah. And Rabbi Akiva turns around to his colleagues and says, you're both wrong. He's a mamzer and a ben hanida. So in order to prove this point, he went and spoke to the mother. Tell me the truth. Be open with me. I won't tell anybody. What happened? She said that night that she was going to the chuppah, she became a niddah. And
So why is he mamzer?
so 1 second, she was already an Eishes Ish, right? Wait a minute, she was an Eishes Ish, right? She's married. That night, she became a niddah when she was getting married. But because she was a niddah, her husband wasn't with her, and the best man took advantage of that.
I never learned.
Yeah, so I guess he's the worst man.
Yeah.
Not the best. Right. So I asked the question. So in other words, the child was born, he was a mamzer, and of course he was a ben hanida. My question was, how is it possible that a child will be born
So from the first
from a woman who's a niddah? How could it be? There's no ovulation then.
through what could it be?
No. Yeah. So when a woman is a niddah, it's already too late. It's only 2 weeks later. Woman does not become pregnant when she's a niddah. Ovulation will only be 2 weeks later. So how could she have become pregnant? What's the answer? What we just learned. Who says that this was dam hanida? Who says that this was her period? This was dam chimud.
But dam chimud also becomes a...
It could have been other dam that came about, but not necessarily from her regular period.
But then why would you be a...
So she would be a nida, but possibly she can get pregnant.
But
you see?
that would be the Rabbanan, so that would have an effect on the child being not wearing a kippah?
No, it all depends where the dam comes from.
Right, we're saying right now that she was not really
No, and what we say is that the whole chashash is that it's the dam chimud over here, and that chashash is at the Rabbanan because there was no hargasha. Okay? But if in fact, I mean, maybe she did have hargasha, that we don't know.
Why don't we say,
Yeah.
why can't we say in that kind of case that simply she is still technically a nida because for whatever reason she didn't get there.
No, yeah, you're right. She hasn't gone to the mikveh yet. She's a nida, but the question is, how does she become pregnant if she has her period?
Even without chilul. Even without chilul.
She never went to the mikveh?
She just never went to the mikveh, therefore she remains technically a nida.
Okay, so what you're saying is that she technically was still a nida from before.
Before. And then someone took advantage of her.
Well, it could be, maybe, all right. That may be another scenario, but from the Lashon of the Gemara, it's understood that she became a nida at the chuppah, or close to it, yeah.
And it's possible. I'm looking it up here right now.
Yeah.
And here's a medical article. It says it's a common misconception that if a woman has sex during her period, she cannot become pregnant. While the woman is unlikely to get pregnant during her period, it is absolutely possible. And then he goes into explaining the details.
I'd like to know what those details are. I never heard of that.
I'll send it to you.
Yeah, yeah. It doesn't, I mean, it could be, unless it's not a regular period. And when we learned about Vestas, we did learn about a period within a period.
Right.
Yeah, you're right. So it's not your ordinary period that comes around once a month. Maybe that's what that's what the article is. Special circumstances.
Every woman falls a 20 to 32 cycle.
Right, yeah.
A woman with a shorter menstrual cycle could have 7 days of bleeding, have intercourse on a final day of bleeding, and ovulate 3 days later.
Yes.
For 3 or 4
Exactly.
days, she could definitely get pregnant.
Yes.
So maybe that was the case.
That would have, there are other scenarios, right? That's very true.
But that would still be a regular...
That would be a regular, yeah, very good. Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. I mean, that could happen too.
How many days between?
Because remember, the sperm can last for a couple of days.
Right, no, I just didn't hear you
Yeah.
example. How many days between?
The sperm can last 3 to 5 days. And what he's talking about is that there were, let me find it again,
Yeah.
there are other things as well. But here he's saying about could have intercourse on a final day of bleeding and obviously 3 days later.
3 days later. Yeah.
It's sort of for 3 to 5 days. She could definitely get pregnant because the two would overlap.
It's a possibility too. In other words,
And also, he's called something breakthrough, spotting, or bleeding between periods.
right? Spotting. Sure.
Mistaken for a period. So that would be
Something similar to what I was saying.
Yeah.
Spots. For whatever reason she spotted. Yeah. All right. So anyway, yes, there are various, I guess, possibilities. Not common, but some possibilities that would render her a nida. And she would become pregnant. And so in that case, he was a mamzer and a menadina, that child. Yes?
This is very interesting. He's saying here sometimes ovulation can happen before the bleeding has stopped.
Oh, okay.
All girls,
That would be a very long period.
all girls can ovulate at different points from cycle to cycle. They can puzzle the girl to know exactly. Okay, so now they're giving you. Okay. So now they give. So having sex during a girl's period is just.
Well, that's something else. Yeah.
No, because of that.
Yeah. And in Halacha Beis, we said that it was to be counted. So even though nothing was done yet as far as the Kiddush are concerned, preparing herself for that day, if it's close enough, that's when the Shiva's Yomim would be counted from. So the Ramah is the one that added that we try to bring it as close as possible to the Be'ilas Mitzvah. Alright, so maybe we should see the Ramah a little bit more inside, because he adds a few additional dinim over here. V'yesh lismoch hatvila somoch lebe'ilas mitzvah b'chol ma'd'efshar, as much as possible we bring it close to the be'ilas mitzvah. K'mash b'mordechai b'shem Rashbam, Ram v'rekeh b'shemov v'raboisu b'gos mo'menin, v'minag litvoil akala leil dalet. Now here the Ramah brings the minig, which is not done necessarily today, but it does correlate to what was done during the time of the Gemara. is that the Kala should go to the mikveh on Leil Dalet, which is Tuesday night. At that time she goes to the Tvila. Even though the actual Bia might only be on Motzei Shabbos. In those days they made a lot of times the weddings on Friday. The actual consummation of the marriage was Motzei Shabbos. But do not take the Tvila and make it more than 4 days before. In other words, don't have the Tvila too much apart from the actual Be'ilah. If she's not going to consummate the marriage on Motzei Shabbos, then she should check herself. Because maybe the chimud would come later, ad Be'ilas mitzvah. So since there was already a Tvila, and it wasn't, today it's a couple of days before. And we try to do it as close as possible. But there are all kinds of circumstances. There may not be a mikveh where she is getting married. There's all kinds of things. So there are sometimes issues and questions that come up where she may have to go to the field a little bit earlier. So each situation has to be judged separately. So it may be possible to bring the Tvila a little bit earlier. It can be done during the day. We'll talk about that maybe another time, about the difference between the day and the night Tvila. But there are some differences on how we deal with a Kala than what we would do for a married woman. So the Ramah says we try to bring it as close as possible to the Be'ilas mitzvah. But if it was a little bit, if the Be'ilah was not on Motzei Shabbos but a little bit later, she should check herself until the day, every day until Be'ilas mitzvah. V'dafka, this is all lechatchila, but b'di'evel ein lehachmir in bot korat pam achas toshiva. As we saw before, we don't have to be makpid if she only checked herself once during the 7 Yikim. B'chol choson yisha lakala kodem sheyiga bo im shavra shiva nekim. We don't do that. The choson should ask the kala, did you keep the shiva nekim? Today there's a choson teacher, hopefully a kala teacher. There is the mother of the kala. It's a whole ritual, especially in certain communities. And hopefully if they know how to do things properly, if they learned the halachas, then the choson doesn't have to, ask her and get, her approval or her permission. We're assuming that everything was done properly.
What was that point about? What was the one just before that? She was not makpid or something?
Even if she did not check herself, and she should have checked herself during those days, especially when they're far apart, if she just checked herself once, it would be okay. Had she not checked herself at all, it would be a problem. So some say she should check every day, especially if the mikvah and the be'ilah are quite a few days apart. So that's what the Bach, the Chochmas bring, that the minig is to require bdika every day. But everybody seems to agree that by the Eved, we're not machmer if she only checked herself once. In Halacha Gimel, this unfortunately could happen. In Dochu HaNesuyin Machmas Ize Siba, let's say they had to postpone the chasana for some reason. They did not agree on what kind of a band they're going to have. They did not agree on something, on money issues. They had some sort of dispute. So Dochu HaNesuyin, they pushed off the marriage, and she's already kept her shiva nekiyim because of dam chimud, right? Even though she already sat shiva nekiyim, she has to do it. She has to redo it the next time they set a date. When they already figure out a compromise and figure out a date. She always checked herself every day. Time. No, actually, even though she checked herself, even though in the days in between, until they made a final day, she checked herself. Still, that does not help her. Now, what's going on over here?
No. I don't understand this, because if it was only for a financial issue, she has already said yes. That didn't change. Now you're just arguing what have been, the finances.
Right, something happened that they... Something happened. Right, yeah.
They had to break off.
Exactly, so that's the question. That's a very good... What you're saying is right. It all depends what happened. Somehow, the typical dispute would involve some financial issue. And because of that, they broke it off pretty much. The Poiskim hold, the Bach, the Taz, the Shach, that if on the same night that they broke it off, for whatever reason, they decided they already have a new date, then she doesn't have to sit Shiva Nakiyim. Other poskim, however, differentiate between who broke it off. If it's the chassan breaking it off, or is it the kala breaking it off? The Taz brings it down. That if it's the chassan that's breaking it off, and not the kala, she doesn't need 7 Nakiyim, because she's still eager to go ahead with it, and she's waiting for the compromise to happen. But if it came from her, the Aruch HaShulchan is machmer. I saw that he's machmer. If she's the one that broke it off, that after a while she agrees, she would have to wait the Shiva Nakim again. But others are makel in this case too. It makes no difference. Yeah, that she wouldn't have to wait. But it all depends, as we said before, if they do have a new date or not. If obviously nothing happened, they both broke it off, they didn't decide till later on, then they have a new date, then the Chaber is clear about that she would have to go back and sit Shiva Nakim, even though she checked herself all these days. Alright, Obar Bekin Sotov Zman Zeh. This is the halacha about becoming a Niddah. She became a Niddah during the time of the Chuppah. Obar Bekin Sotov Zman Zeh. If he did go ahead, nonetheless, did not wait, and married her during this time, or in other words, she didn't go to the mikveh, v'chein chosen shepir sakalos Niddah, or a kala who became a Niddah during that night, kodem shebala, before the chosen was with her. Then there's the halachas of how to conduct each other. In other words, they went ahead with the chasna, and what needed to be done was not done. In other words, either she didn't go to the mikveh, either she became a. You see, it's all the same. Not going to the mikveh, becoming a Niddah, or not following the instructions of what she should have done. So he basically, they say in English, jumped the gun. Is that the word? I mean, he said they went ahead with the ceremony, and she's a Niddah now. Lo yisyahed imo, he cannot be yichud. There's a halachos legabe yichud, who can be in the same locked room together, and who cannot. He cannot be, even though a husband and a wife, even though his wife is a Niddah, can be yichud in the house. We don't suspect that he's going to commit, or they're going to commit in the bed, because they're used to each other. They're 10, 11, 12 days apart, no problem. But this is the first time. So the Chachamim were concerned because of the Yetzer Hara. We're going to have to keep them apart. Elohu Yoshem ben Anoshim, Yeshinim ben Anoshim, he's going to have to sleep on the men's side, she's going to have to sleep on the woman's side. Now if you read this halach, you say to yourself, what's going on up here? There's men and women all over the place. In those days, a lot of times, the room, basically the house, was one big room. Or not a very large area. Or the sleeping quarters were such that there's people everywhere. He has to sleep by the men's side, she has to sleep in the woman's side. And there's more requirements. This already brings various additional details or other additional halachas that the Mechaber doesn't talk about, and how to accommodate the chassan and kala. Achronim speak about this, whether they can be in separate rooms in the house or not. And obviously that's not always sufficient, because one can easily go to the other if he chooses to. It has to be such a situation where one will not easily go over to the other. So if you were to have 2 separate houses, obviously that's already a shmirah. Locking the door is not enough. What is required for many poskim is, as we will soon see, there's a machlokes, is a child sleeping with a boy sleeping with the chassan, a girl sleeping with the kala, if it's in the same house. Unless the door opens up to Reshus Rabbim, or if it's in the hotel, opens up to the hallway where people are, going in and out. It has to be such a situation where they will not come to yichud. And there's a problem of yichud at night and during the day, but there's some differences. So let me see here. Maybe we'll go through the various chilukim in the poskim, and then we'll read the rest. The Rishonim describe the situation as follows: when we are saying that each one should sleep with his group of people, in other words, the man with the men, the man with the men, and the woman with the women, that's when everybody's together. However, some say that you do need, besides that, you do need extra shmirah. What's the extra shmirah? The Raavad says you need 2 shmirahs. Hu bin ha'anoshim vehi bin ha'anoshim. That's already 2 shmirahs. In other words, when you have a group of people, he is with the men and she's with the women, you are making this requirement of the two of them. So that's two shmiras. Because the question is, how much shmira do you need? The fact that the two are separated, and there's a lot of people, that already is going to help the inyan of yichud. Right? When you have a lot of men, you have a lot of women, that already helps. But the question is, how many? So the Raiva just says you need two shmiras, and that's enough. The Rosh says, one shmira is sufficient. Either he or her. In other words, either he with the men or she with the women. And there's a question, legabe, how many should be at every shmira, at each one? Is it one child or two? One shomer or two shomer? So these are the various questions or chilukim that the Rishonim discuss. Is it only a child, or can it be an adult? This all pertains to Hilchas Yichud, because we're always afraid that if it's not a child, if it's someone who understands too much, it may cause more trouble than serve as a protection. In Hilchas Yichud, you come across this. What about two men with one woman? What about two women with one man? When the man's wife is with him, that's a whole different story. That she protects him. But otherwise, sometimes another man is not a good enough shmir. It all depends if they're God-fearing or not. Or two women, with one man. There's different halachas and there's different opinions as to which one we follow. Either way, one has to be careful in Hilchas Yichud. There's ways to deal with it. A woman who's alone in her home has a contractor coming to her home. It depends if her husband is in town. She has to leave the door open. There's all kinds of situations that one has to consider before he locks himself in a room with a person he's not allowed to be with alone. So that's really part of the question over here of what do you do? The main idea behind this halacha, however, is that on that night, until she becomes clean, of course, they have to be apart, and there cannot be yichud between them. The Raiv that holds that the main shmira is at night, not during the day you don't need, there's no problem with the yichud. The Rosh holds that there's no difference between day and night. As we will see in the Ramah requires it during the day too, but he says that one shmir is sufficient. Either a cotton with him or a katana girl with her. And as we said before, if they would not be in one room, and the doors would open up to the outside, it would also be okay. And then we'll just read it inside quickly. Let's say she was clean when he got married to her, and he wasn't with her intimately, there was no intimacy. Niddah, then she became a Niddah later on sometime. She doesn't need shimur. Why? Because he's strong. He resisted. He was able to control himself. For some reason, in other words, they didn't consummate the marriage.
Leave this up to him?
So the halacha is v'machmir tov ala bracha. In other words, if in fact he was able to hold himself back, just because he was, and that's what's interesting here is, who's to say he'll be able to control himself next time around? That's why we're machmir. Just because he was the first day, say, it's okay, I'll wait. Yeah, there's no rush. You shouldn't do that, by the way. But for some reason, the marriage wasn't consummated, and then she became a Niddah. Well, now you have to have shmira because they weren't together yet. So one really has to be machmir. There's no difference here between first-time marriage or widows getting married. As we said before, some say that the yichud issues or problems apply during the day as well as during the night. But you don't need two shmiras, just either he amongst the men or she amongst the women. As we said, if they're not in one room, if they're two separate rooms completely, two separate homes, facing the street as the Chazon Ish said, then they don't need shimra at all. It's not just two separate rooms in the house. What some people do is they just go back to their parents' home, or to one of their parents, actually. And but then you would need a lock. It's just better that if they're not in the same house. Some say that at night you need 2 shmirs, ubayom mutar lisyached, and during the day it's okay to be misyached. Ve'aminhag likach cotton etzel hachosen u'ktan etzel hakala. That's the minhag, is to take a cotton by the chosen and a ktana by the kala. Ve'in misyachdim bayom below cotton or ktana. And even during the day, there's no yichud without at least a child. In other words, we don't take a chance. The last seif Hey, is machzer grushosu tzricha leishiv shiva nekim. One who takes back his wife after he divorced her, she needs to sit shiva nekim. As we said earlier, there could be the shiva, there could be the dam chimud, she could be a niddah, whatever. She would still require shiva nekim before they're able to be together again. Now, what this halacha presents itself today is there are situations today where, unfortunately, I don't know how much they existed in the past, but this halacha presents the following scenario. Let's say a man was with a woman living together, or biznus. Now, what's the difference between living together and znus? When I say living together, I mean like husband and wife without chuppah and kiddushin. And znus is znus. In other words, they weren't...
One night stand.
Yeah, or a couple nights, or whatever. Yeah,
It's also one night stand.
yeah, I guess so. So the halacha, it's brought down in Pischei Tshuva here, that whoever was with a woman, biznus, and now wants to marry her, is there a chash of chimud or not? Since he already was with her. So he says yes. In such a situation, there would be a chash chimud. It wasn't his wife. But the Shevet HaLevi, Vosner, says that's not exactly the case where you're dealing with a man and woman who are a balei tshuva, and they want to get now married, kedas Moshe b'Yisrael, chuppah v'kiddushin, but they used to live together without chuppah and kiddushin for a while. So on that, he says it's mistaver. It makes more sense that now that he wants to marry her properly, that there's no chash chimud anymore, because they're already used to each other. And that's what I was saying by situations that have presented themselves today. Now, even though his machzir grushosa we saw, she requires shiva nikiyim.
That's not necessarily because of chimud.
No, because of chimud. Yeah.
Because of chimud.
Also, in other words, that's what he says. What would be the difference? What would you say is the difference? Obviously, there's some chimud potential. Machzir grushosa. A new honeymoon, a new excitement. Whereas the Shevet HaLevi's situation, or example which unfortunately happens, where people are doing tshuva, and now they want to go to the Rabbanut, they want to get married properly. They haven't been divorced and apart. They're just formalizing everything correctly.
Why don't we say that when they get married,
Yeah.
all the Averas are forgiven,
Okay.
and therefore we don't worry about this? Seriously.
Yeah.
And use that as a cool.
All the various of it, but there might be some excitement. That's the only question. Is there a chashash for new excitement, renewed excitement? And
I don't know.
in Machzir Grushosa, apparently there is. But the Shevet HaLevi says that in the case of Balei Tshuvas who want to do things properly now, they've been living together for some time, most likely there's no real chashash for chimud again. So that they don't have to, do the shiva again. But if she didn't go to the mikveh, obviously she would still have to go to the mikveh. I mean, there are some Balei Tshuvas who've always gone to the mikveh. That they kept for some reason.
How did they do that if they weren't married?
Right. They do things that they're not supposed to. There are people who do that, you should know. Because they're afraid of chorus. They're afraid of this thing. And without the chuppah and kiddushin is also a problem, but it's not the same as chorus. I mean, you see? So some, are intelligent enough to realize that even though they're not doing everything 100% right, but at least do this properly. Not everyone, but some I heard are careful in this area. So now they want to formalize everything kedas Moshe b'Yisrael. Most likely there wouldn't be a chashash v'chimud, therefore she wouldn't have to sit shiva nekiyim. Unless, of course, she was a niddah, then she would have to be going to the mikveh, and of course that would require hefsek tahara and everything else that a regular woman niddah would
So now I have a
need.
question for you.
Yeah.
You said something before about loflik.
Yeah.
Now, would you really make an exception for a woman who wasn't married, and halachically shouldn't be going to the mikveh, but she did?
Right.
So you would make an exception for her and you say, well, then we waive the 7 days of nikim?
No, these are the
Or would you
shit.
say,
These are just the shit.
or would you say, regardless of whether you went or you didn't, in terms of halacha, you didn't go because you're not supposed to.
Right.
We're not going to make a distinction here and give you a benefit because you were violating halacha and went when you weren't married.
Well, obviously, she may not have done things right, 100%.
What is the avera in going if you weren't married?
There's no real avera. There's no real avera.
No, the Rabbanim said you're not allowed to go.
The poskim right today that they shouldn't. Yeah, you shouldn't go.
They're not allowed.
Right, you shouldn't. Right.
They don't let her go.
They don't let her go. Yeah.
So the question
But
is,
I've seen cases in Eretz Yisrael,
They
in
might
Mikvaot
go.
De'ari, that they slipped in.
Well,
Today
they
there's
slip
more.
in.
Today there's more protection there. They don't allow them to come in. But
they don't allow them.
Yeah.
Right? So they went against the will
of what's nohug, of what's the
It's more than just,
what the norm
question
is.
is, what is the status exactly of
Yeah.
this prohibition?
Yeah.
Is it just a minhag?
It's
Or
just
is it
it's,
an outright halacha? Or what is it?
yeah. No, it's a halacha, but it's not an iser. In other words, if a woman went, she's not really committing an iser. It's not transgressing anything. But it's for obvious reasons that the Chachamim were concerned. If we let them do this, it could lead to trouble.
Well, they have a reason to do
Yeah,
it.
so they had a very good reason to do
But
that.
just because there is
yeah.
a reason doesn't mean that it's
Yeah.
that it negates its status as an answer.
Yeah, no, but it's not a regular iser. So here the question is only chimud. That's the only question. But obviously, if she's Niddah, which very possibly she is, if she was not Shomer Torah mitzvahs, then she would have to go through the process anyway.